Hello, my name is Dr. Mike Brooks. I'm a licensed psychologist and the director of the Austin Psychology and Assessment Center, or ApaCenter. Today is part 3 of the topic, Does video game violence cause children and adolescents to become more violent? So I hope you've seen the other 2 segments. If not, maybe go back to those now. So today we're going to cover this topic a little bit more, and I'm going to start out with video game violence, why all the fuss? So a couple points here. 1, there are millions of gamers, as we've kind of shown from the other presentations. A large percentage of kids and teens play video games. Many of these games are rated M for mature, which is for ages 17 and up, or T for teen, which is ages 13 and up, because of their graphic depictions of violence. And these depictions of violence have gotten much more sophisticated and graphically detailed with each passing year. So I grew up with the first generation of video games and with Atari and Pac-Man and Asteroids and Centipede and the first wave of those arcade games, and they were very basic and rudimentary, and even then there was violent content that caused a lot of people to be concerned, and we could sort of laugh at it now, what people were concerned about. But you look at the games now and how graphically sophisticated they are, and the depictions of blood and the scenes of violence and carnage and Call of Duty and Grand Theft Auto and games like that, is they can be not only graphically violent but very just brutal. Like in Grand Theft Auto, you are the antagonist and not the protagonist, so you're in the role of the bad guy and committing crimes and kind of working your way up the crime syndicate and become a crime boss or that sort of thing, and you're committing acts of crime. And I've played this one before, and you can just go up and mug people on the street and hit them with chop them up with a machete, or hit them with a baseball bat, and carjack, and all these things. And hear screaming and people running and blood and all those things. And those things concern a lot of people, and I think they should. I mean, kids, especially young kids, should not be playing these games, so they are rated M for a reason. So I think there is a lot of reason to be concerned, though, because of how graphically violent some of the games can be. Now, I want to say that doesn't mean they're necessarily realistic. For instance, a game like Halo could be very graphically sophisticated in the way it shows violence, but it's set in a future with aliens and space marines and things like that, with futuristic weapons that don't exist in real life. So it may be more graphically sophisticated, but I want to put a little caveat there. It doesn't always mean it's more realistic, as in like real life. And then with particular shootings, especially mass shootings, oftentimes the shooters played violent video games, and that's where a lot of heat has come on, like in Newtown and things like that. It puts violent video games in the spotlight. I do want to say not every time has the shooter been a player of violent video games. Sometimes hardly at all, and sometimes they played video games but not the extremely violent ones. But the media is quick to jump on and blame video games. So the next thing is the popularity of video game violence. So I want to go through some statistics here on the popularity of video game violence. So I'll just read through some statistics here. You'll see on the PowerPoint slide. 19% of video games sold in 2011 were action games. 18.4% of video games sold in 2011 were shooter games. A lot of these were the first-person shooters that people get concerned about, like Call of Duty. 3.7% of video games sold in 2011 were fighting games. Fighting games, I think, used to be a lot more popular than they are now. They still have their niche, but the shooting games seem to be, in the first-person shooter games, seem to be even more popular. 26.5% of all video and computer games sold in 2011 were rated M for mature. And then Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 was the top-selling video game in 2011, and since 2011, and probably by about now, about 9 million units have sold in the United States. So it just, Call of Duty, every time there's a new version that comes out, people flock to buy it, and it sells millions and millions of copies and generates hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. And as a psychologist, I can say I'd say almost every teen or young adult male that I work with has played Call of Duty to some extent, some very heavily. Some more video game statistics. In a study done by the Journal of Adolescent Health in a sample of 1,000 boys, 68% reported playing M-rated video games, and these were boys younger than 17, so ones who should not be playing these games, or that's according to the rating. 85% of parents are aware of the ESRB, and that's the Entertainment Software Rating Board. You can go to esrb.org, and it gives a lot of information about all the different video games, and you can look up the ratings and why they're rated M or T, for instance, so then you can research on, is this video game appropriate for your child? 98% of parents feel this system is helpful in choosing games for their child. Now, one thing with the video game violence is there was, years ago, and I think there still is a fair amount of research done on this topic about the effects of television violence and movie violence on viewers, and especially kids and adolescents. And when I was doing my dissertation research on the effect of video game violence on kids, I certainly looked a lot to that body of literature because there were decades of research done on this topic. So I want to sum it up. Again, it's sort of controversial. You have people who fall on different sides of the fence here, and it can be highly political. A lot of people want to jump on television violence and say how bad it is, and I think, again, there are reasons for concern. Some of the research has found negative effects, but it's not without controversy. I do want to say that. So generally within the literature, there's a consensus that television violence increases aggression, and that's in the long and short term. So they've done, both of those. So it's longitudinal, long-term studies, and then in the short term, like right after playing or watching a violent show. One meta-analysis, when they crunched all the data from different studies, they said about 10% of societal violence might be attributable to television violence. Again, not without controversy. One thing from watching the television violence is there tends to be desensitization to the violence, such that exposure to the violence no longer is physiologically arousing to the viewer. And some argue it should be. When we see acts of violence, it should raise our adrenaline and cause arousal and red flags in us to say, oh gosh, something's going on here, we need to pay attention to, maybe we need to act. But when we're exposed over and over to scenes of violence on TV and movies and maybe video games, that we might become desensitized, so it's not that big of a deal anymore. And then people who watch a lot of violence, they're more fearful of being victimized by violence, so that's another area of concern. And there's no real support for catharsis, so there's this idea that we purge all of our aggressive impulses from watching scenes of violence, but generally the literature has not supported that idea. It tends to be the opposite. The more that we're exposed to violence, there tends to be an increase in our behavior, thoughts, feelings, and behaviors related to aggression. And aggression is increasingly explained by learning models or cognitive models, such that when we're exposed to the violence, that we encode information from the scenes, and it becomes maybe behavioral scripts that we use in similar situations to act on in our day-to-day life. And again, this is not without controversy, and it is a case of people who tend to be more aggressive and violent are also drawn to violence and scenes of violence in television and video games, so that's a huge caveat about this. So that concludes today's segment on the topic, does video game violence cause children and adolescents to become more violent? Now, next segment, I'm going to show the evolution of violence in video games, so I hope you'll come back to that one because it'll be really interesting. We'll have some scenes, some pictures to look at, and also some video segments. So again, I'm Dr. Mike Brooks. I'm a licensed psychologist and the director of the Austin Psychology and Assessment Center, or ApaCenter. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you soon.